Hi, so I'm gonna address something because I'm on my way to the university, because as most of you know, I'm studying, I'm doing my master, and then I'm also doing a second bachelor degree. So there is one problem, with the university thing, and that is that, most of the people who go to university and, study, I mean, me myself, I'm doing a master. So when you have sort of done a certain level of, sort of education, you become this form of expert. And to be an expert, in something, it's not, you know, the ultimate goal, and it's not either the ultimate sort of solution to most problems either. Because what you will be sort of expert in is a form or point of world view, that is formulated through a certain set of, understandings, and concepts about certain things, that has been sort of manufactured through this whole process of science. And there is like a really good thing, to actually have a look at the philosophy behind science, because that is going to sort of give you an idea of what the religion behind science is. Because just as anything else, because there are religions, that has very like strict, more or less strict, like worldviews, and things, and then there is science, that is supposed to be beyond all of these different religions, and sort of be imposing this form of expert solutions and expert, concepts and whatever. And if a person believes blindly in science, well, then that is also a form of religion, because just to trust any expert in what they are saying or what they are doing their research in, I mean, look at how they're going about doing that research and what is the reason behind of the research, because most of the times there is like always some background reason to why certain things are, sort of researched on. And also every single scientist, is not objective. Okay, not objective. Everyone have their former, prior forms of understandings, whatever field they might be doing their research in. They have a subjective form of set of knowledge that they're going to go about, and often it is within, sort of a shaped kind of field that has certain structures and certain concepts and stuff that specific scientist is going to undertake the research in. So already there, it's like a form of limitation, and it's a form of shaped kind of frame for what that research can be done in. So I just want to sort of bring this form of criticism, like to have a criticizing form of mindset, that do not trust all scientific research and things, because it is not objective at all. And there is like, of course we have benefits from the science, there are certain things, for example technology and things can be used in good, for good things, that are benefiting. But in many cases a lot of the science is also sort of undertaken to sort of create or like shape certain outcomes, for the general society and so forth, and also to sort of serve certain interest in the society, and I mean, we can sort of choose what are we learning, because knowledge itself, whatever you have knowledge in, I mean, it's not the ultimate truth. And like now I'm talking about the more scientific form of knowledge, it's not the ultimate truth. It's only a form of concept on the reality that humans can sort of perceive through different forms of instruments, and different forms of methods, that we're using in the scientific field, and also through the senses, what can we take in and what can we sort of, make understandable. So yeah, so it's like to have that form of understanding, when you actually, because a lot of people, even myself, you know, before I sort of started to study, I thought that science was very objective, and I thought that it's very, you know, it's serving the highest sort of purpose, like the highest good for the society. And it's not that case at all. Like a lot of the, you know, as you know, we have a financial system, you know, and that financial system also has an interest, you know. There are people behind who sort of is affecting how things in the financial system is undertaken and unfolded, and they have different interests, and there is certain interest, you know, behind science and research, and that is going to shape the, you know, product. What are we doing the research on, you know? Not everything is you know, taking the perspective in science, you know, in the research that it could be, and that would be more serving the more, you know, highest good or whatever, you know, more like have a better form of outcome and so forth. So, and this is especially what you can see actually when you reading in, like when science is undertaking this form of expert, sovereign form of position in relation to religion, you know, because a lot of the science, you know, that is done more like social related science, and I'm going to say something because I have studied quite a lot of social science as well, and social science, okay, there are like methods and whatever, you know, placed in order to sort of go about and do these forms of sciences, but there has over, like, you know, over the 1900th century there has been quite a lot of science that has had the aim of serve certain interest in West Europe. I mean, I'm from West Europe, so it has been serving certain interests for West Europe and also for the North American sort of context. So for example, I have recently been in some of my courses I've been reading about the Orientalism, which is very much not something that is objective form of science. It's sort of taking a perspective in observing others in relation to something that is perceived to be superior to whatever that other is conceptualized to be, you know. And I mean, this whole sort of science of Orientalism, that has just breakdown, because it's you know, the core of that form of science is not really, you know, neutral at all. It has a political aim behind, and that is to sort of gain, you know, benefits for a certain few individuals in a population, and sort of find these weakness points in another population, you know, and use it for that advantage, and sort of back up the you know, to find these arguments in order to actually be able to undertake certain actions and so forth that is going to have an impact on that other population, you know, like they're making a separation between humans in this sense, you know. So one of the books that I actually was reading, I was reading it this weekend, and I just want to say something that, because I know that a lot of people who has a religion, you know, they're going to come in contact with a lot of things in science that is sort of approaching religion from a perspective that it is something that needs to be, you know, seen through, that you can see through all religions. There is something that is a problem with religion and so forth. And also today, and this is something that I think is very important to sort of highlight, and that is that in the more Western European setting and in the North American setting, there is quite a, you know, strong tendency in general to sort of have a consumerism behavior when it comes to approaching religion and religious practices. You can actually, most people, when they're talking about this whole New Age movement and stuff, you know, that is in its essence a form of consumerism, you know, because people are choosing what they want to sort of undertake for forms of religious practices, and they are adapting different practices depending on what they feel is going to benefit them most. So it doesn't really have so much to do about form of following a certain set of structures, and it doesn't have so much to do either with glorification, of some higher entity or God or whatever. It has more to do with what is the benefit for the individual, and what is sort of possible for that individual to choose in a certain timing. And I mean, to approach religion in a form of consumerist mindset and this form of capitalistic way of thinking, I mean, it's going to cause some problems, because religion itself, these world religions that we have today, they are not really intended to be forms of consumerism that you just can go in. It's not religion is not a supermarket, okay? It's not something you just go in and you are like, okay, well, I don't want this, but I want this, but I don't want that, and then I'm going to take this and this and this, because that is consumerism. And one of the key things behind religions are also that, consumerism can often not be so beneficial, because it sort of is taking away energy and time from other sort of activities, and especially taking away time from the religion, So so to be aware of that, where is that form of mindset coming from, and also to be aware of how that consumerist mindset is sort of applying to different forms of context, and different forms of things, not just the actual exchange of goods and services, but also religious services, So that is a very important thing, and this is mostly common in West Europe and in North America, because that is where the commerce, this whole consumerism has been fueled to the bottom. It has been really integrated into the human mindset across these places, because it is benefiting the capitalist system that we currently have. So I was actually reading this book over the weekend. It's called Islamic Capitalism. And now, before I even sort of picked up this book, I was quite aware of that this one is not going to be neutral in any sense. It is written by someone who is called Maxim Rodinson. And it does have a foreword of Roger Owen. And I think this book was published in the middle of the 1900th century. And one of the things about 1900th century is that a lot of science that is sort of social science that has been done on Middle East, Asia, sort of southern parts of the world, that has been done by westernized scientists. It is not a neutral kind of science. It has some form of aim behind, in sort of seeing through and finding the weakness points, and just sort of strengthening their own identity as a form of superior, to have that form of strengthening of superiority, and to also sort of find arguments in order to be able to undertake certain actions. So I would say that you do not have to waste time on reading things that was written during the middle of the 1900th century, when it comes to stuff that is related to, for example, Islam or Middle East and these things, because most of those things are just going to highlight that aspect of we and them, that sort of mindset. And also it's going to sort of try and shape your understanding, because it is an expert who has written the book, so it's going to try and shape you into certain things that then is going to disline your own connection into, or affiliation into, a certain religion, for example Islam. So that is quite a common theme, and so this one, I think in general this author has received some criticism before as well, so I'm not the first one. But one of the underlying tones in this book was that this author has a very positive sort of approach to a certain religion, to Judaism. And then it's sort of, this author is sort of highlighting some things that he thinks can form of you know, shape the mindset of Muslims, in the sense that he sort of tried to highlight that capitalism, in the sense that there is a few people at the top who is possessing all of the you know, financial sort of monetary means, is the right thing for the rest of the world's welfare. He tries to highlight that by sort of infusing this whole vision of that, you know, exchange of goods and services was very common during the time when, you know, back when Muhammad the Prophet was alive. And that is also just, I mean, to exchange goods and services between two parties or three parties or whatever, that is quite a common thing, you know, in general. You know, there is always an exchange of energy, you know, and so forth. But just this whole concept of having a few individuals owning everything and everyone else have to support that system, that is not really connected to Islam, I would say, because Islam has this form of fairness and sort of equality. I mean, yet to be able to live in the world and sort of, you know, be able to exchange energy and to be able to exchange goods and services, yes, but should a few people own everything? Not really. So, so that is one of the things that he tries to sort of infuse into the understanding, you know, and that is just not really that is not something I'm going to go into the trap into thinking. As well, he sort of takes some very interesting you know, sort of attacks, you know, I would say, on not, I mean, I'm going to say like this first. There is nothing that you can say that is going to cause any harm on any religion, you know. Because at some point, you know, religion is a form of abstract phenomenon, you know, and people are sort of experiencing some form of emotional connection to certain religions. And the only thing that you really can sort of hurt is that emotional connection that people have to a certain religion. But the religion itself, you know, that is an abstract phenomenon that people have sort of taken an emotional connection to. So you cannot really harm any religion, whatever you might be saying, but only the way that people are perceiving it, you know. So what this kind of dude is doing, because I think it's a man, this author, he sort of takes some forms of criticism against things that are written in the, you know, in the Quran and so forth. And I'm not even going to bring forth the, you know, essence of what he actually is talking about, because I don't think that is even, you know, worth mentioning. It's not worth me making into words, you know, making into some form of energy that I even sharing, you know, because I know that what he says, it's just, there is another argument against it, you know, and that is the beauty of it, that a lot of the things that you can find in these 1900th century books that sort of has a criticism against certain religions, there is another argument against it, you know, that can be utilized, you know. And in many cases, I mean, if you sort of are sure about your own emotional connections and so forth to certain religions, you do not even have to bother about doing these forms of argumentation or try and protect certain religions, because really, how are you going to be able to attack something that is beyond your own human experience, you know, because that is sort of what the religion is sort of focusing on. Because in this way of consumerism, there is one thing that we cannot really buy, and that is some form of afterlife security, you know, and that is what today the technology has not yet been able to sort of infuse. But, you know, we cannot buy the security of afterlife, you know, and that is something that religion is sort of providing, you know. And that's why in Western Europe and North America, there are still religions, you know, even by people who, you know, has been living there for some time and so forth, but they sort of haven't found technical solution to sort of ensure that they have an afterlife, and that's why they're turning to religion, you know. And also because of other reasons, that's not the only one. Like, always think about individuals have very diverse forms of approaches to religion and the reasons to why they going about and doing certain things. But this book, I just want to say that in general, a lot of the books that has been written, you know, during the 1900th century, when the sort of some of the universities was very hard actually to access, you know, for people who was not part of certain aspects of the society and so forth. Those kind of works and stuff, they have really a certain angle to them in their interest in what they're trying to sort of share and you know, impose their own expert solutions to, you know. So I would say that don't just buy and read all of that rubbish, because it is quite a lot of rubbish. I would rather say that try and make the understanding for yourself, you know, in that sense that you may be choosing more, I would say, recent sources, because nowadays the universities are more accessible for more diverse backgrounds of people, and that means also that the science cannot only serve one part of the spectrum, you know, of interest. It must be sort of also bringing in some other forms of understandings and so forth, and interest. So I hope that is what's going to happen in the future, you know, more forms of interest and perspectives and so forth. So I just wanted to share that because I know that I spoke about this book before, and I just want to say that this is not a book I recommend. You can read it if you want to, but it doesn't really, you know, bringing anything that is worth to know into the table, because there is a lot better sources, you know.